Hi, welcome! My name is David, and I'm going to show you how I make Minecraft pendants just like these ones. Before we get to business, I'm going to use a technique called marquetry to make those pendants, which basically consists in cutting several pieces of wood veneers of different colors to create an image. So you could basically use like 30 different woods to create a huge painting, or you could use 2 different colors like I'm going to do today to create something more minimalist. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my whole creative process, so starting from the designing to the laser cutting, the assembling and the finishing part. I hope you will find it inspiring as much as I do. Let's get into it. Alright, so very briefly let's jump into Illustrator because I don't want to bore you out with all that design stuff, but for good measure, here's my design. I traced it based on the default grass texture from Minecraft, and I made 3 colorways, grass, snow and puzzle. As you can see, I'm gonna make a batch of 12. This grid right here, I'm going to cut in a different wood and it's going to hold all those pieces in place so we can press them all at once later on. One last thing to note is that those parts each have 0.5 mm of extra thickness, just to account for the material loss that comes from the laser cut. Okay, moving on, I selected some veneers for each color. First we have a piece of curly maple that I will use for the grid because it's a strong wood. Then we have some American walnut for the dirt part of the blocks, and finally 3 small pieces for the top of the designs, so that's some tulip tree wood for the grass and snow and some paddock for the puzzle. So before we lay the veneers down on the honeycomb bed, I want to tape the back side of the maple. The reason behind it is that the grid contains some very fine lines, and if the veneer doesn't have this support, it will simply break. By the way, I'm using some low-tack painter's tape, like the basic purple stuff that you can buy in any hardware store. It's now time to lay all the pieces down on the honeycomb bed. Nothing special here, I'm just securing each of them with the same tape so that they don't fly away when the air assist of my laser starts working. So now that everything is ready, it is time to put that meal in the oven. Okay, right before we start cutting, let's jump on Lightburn so we can copy each design to its respective piece of wood. I'm going to be cutting at a speed of 150 mm per minute at 10% power, which is more than enough since my veneers are about 0.5 mm thick. You can see that some small pieces are being blown away by the air assist, but luckily they didn't get cut twice. I guess I still have to get a hang of how much power I need to put out on the air pump. Here we are, after 20 minutes of cutting, we have 25 parts coming fresh out of the laser. Let's assemble them. So the first step in my assembly process is to lay some tape sticky side up on my workspace. It will ensure that the parts don't move anymore after I place them. And with that ready, I can place the grid, which as promised didn't break. Here I'm placing the dirt parts in their respective sections. And finally, time for the top parts to be added and the blocks will be complete. I'm making sure that the components are fitting tightly together so that the surface can be as smooth as possible after pressing. It seems that everything is in place, so for those pendants to have a bit of thickness to them, we need to think of a surface to glue those veneers onto. I could go the easy way and choose a simple sheet of wood, but I prepared instead 6 other layers of American walnut so that we can basically make our own plywood. This way, I'm sure that the overall color of the jewel will match the front. 3 of those pieces have the grain going horizontally and the 3 others have it vertically. When I glue all of it together, I will alternate the grain orientations so that the final product doesn't warp with time. Because that always happens if you glue some veneers together with the grain going in the same direction. My go-to choice for veneer work is Tybond 3, and that's not a sponsor by the way, because it has an open assembly time of 8 minutes, which is perfect when you have so many layers. I'm using a brush so that I'm sure that I'm applying a thin and even spread of glue. Alright, so the last layer is now in place. I'm gonna add a piece of cooking paper on top of it, because if some glue somehow makes its way on the top, the paper won't leave any residue on the wood thanks to its non-stick properties. After this, I'm closing the whole thing with more tape and cutting it out. It's now ready to be pressed. I'm placing the veneers in a vise between some MDF boards to make sure that the surface is smooth and flat. And I also add some extra clamps just for good measure. After a couple days of curing, the vise is ready to be opened. Some people might think that 48 hours of pressing is overkill, but gluing veneers together isn't as simple as solid wood. If you don't wait for the glue to be completely dry, warping will happen all the time. The next part of the process is the painstaking and taping. You gotta be careful with that, as if you go too fast you might rip some part of the veneer away when you pull the tape. This is why I'm using a low tack tape, as a higher tack tape will almost always keep some of your material with it. When the piece is fully untaped, it's gonna have a lot of glue residue on it and be very sticky. My solution to that is to use a belt sander cleaner and to rub the wood until the surface is clean. The surface softness seems to be satisfying. The piece is now ready for the scroll saw. This is where having the grid in a different color really helps, as it's basically showing me exactly where I have to cut. One might say that I could use my laser for those cuts, right? But the scroll saw is a much faster option, to be honest, because I don't have to lay all the pieces on the honeycomb bed and I don't have to deal with light burn. After all this cutting, this is what I end up with. It's now time for those mini Minecraft blocks to get on my mini belt sander. Unfortunately, I didn't press record at the right time and I don't have any footage of it. But this is the result I'm looking for, rounded edges for a better look. I'm now going to manually sand all the pendants. My goal is to smoothen the surfaces and get rid of all the remaining edges. I don't use the belt sander for those, as it's just too violent and it will take too much material with it, which obviously cannot be undone. I'm using some 120 grit sandpaper for the shaping, followed by 240 and 400 for the finishing. All the pieces are sanded, they will now get drilled and get a new hook and ring. I'm using a small hand drill for that job, which is pretty long to do, but gentle enough so that I don't end up with an accidental exit hole. I'm pretty sure there would be better tools than my oversized fingers to insert that screw, so if you know any, let me know in the comments. Last but not least, I put the ring in place and desperately try to close it using my nails. To close the crafting part of this video, here's a biblically accurate reconstitution of my painting process. Alright, that's it for this one. Please give me some feedback in the comments because I'm so curious to know what you think. Like, did you get bored at some point? Would you have maybe skipped the designing part if it's not your thing? Or would you have liked more information or details, explanations about a specific part of the process? I'm open to any advice. If you enjoyed or got anything from this video, please consider subscribing and liking the video, it really helps me out. And if you want to help even more, well, you might want to consider buying one of those pendants for yourself. I will link my Etsy shop in the description of the video. Until next time, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.